She showed up in my door just after sundown, boots gone, dress torn, and a storm curling up behind her like it meant to swallow whatever was left of her. Said her name was Clara. Said she had no horse, no past worth speaking of, and no time to lie. Then she made me a promise. I'll warm your bed for 1 week if you never ask me why I cry in my sleep. There's a kind of quiet in a woman's voice when she ain't begging and she ain't selling, just asking for a place to fall apart without someone trying to fix her. And I should have shut the door, but I didn't, because she looked like someone who'd already been buried once and dug her way back up just to find the world hadn't changed a bit. She stepped inside like she was already halfway gone, didn't say thank you, didn't smile, just walked straight to the hearth, held out her hands to the fire and stood there in silence, like she didn't know what to do now that she was warm. I watched her a while, long enough to notice she never turned her back to the window, long enough to see the tremble in her fingers wasn't from the cold. That night she slipped beneath the blankets without ceremony, didn't undress, didn't speak. She lay with her back to me, still as a grave, except when the crying started. Not loud, not broken, just soft, like a ghost remembering how to mourn. And me, I kept my word, didn't ask. But I didn't sleep much neither. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the sound of a woman trying not to be heard, and wondering what kind of week I'd just invited into my life. Second night, she didn't wait for me to blow out the lantern. She was already in bed by the time I stepped out of my boots, blanket pulled up to her chin, hair braided down her back, face turned to the window like she was listening for something only she could hear. I slipped in beside her careful, not wanting to startle her. But she didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't speak. For a long stretch we just laid there, me watching the ceiling, her listening to whatever ghosts came knocking after dark. And then she said, quiet as smoke, "You breathe too loud." I turned my head, looked at her, and for the first time she was looking back. Not guarded, not cold, just tired. There was a kind of moonlight in her eyes, soft, far away, like she'd spent the whole day remembering a place she never wanted to return to. And then, without asking anything, she reached for my hand beneath the blanket. Didn't hold it, just let her fingers brush mine, slow and deliberate, like she was feeling for a heartbeat in the dark.
"You're warm," she whispered. "I forgot what warm felt like."
I didn't speak. Didn't need to. Sometimes warmth is the only answer a man can give. I could feel the outline of her knees against my leg, her breath drawing slower now, deeper, like my stillness was something she could rest against. And when her head settled on my chest, it didn't feel like seduction. It felt like surrender. She didn't cry that night, but she didn't sleep either. Just lay there, one hand resting over my heart like she was counting the minutes, or maybe the promises. And somewhere between the silence and her breath in my ear, she said something I almost didn't catch. "If anyone knocks, don't open the door." The third night, she came to bed after me. I heard her undress in the dark, slow, unhurried, like she was shedding more than just cloth. Boots first, then that tattered dress she'd worn too long. Then the soft slide of bare skin beneath the covers. She didn't say a word, just curled into me like we'd been doing this for years, like I already knew the shape of her sorrow and chose to hold it anyway. Her breath was warm against my neck, and her fingers moved along my chest like she was reading something there. Not words, but weight. And when I turned to face her, she didn't pull away. She looked at me with eyes that didn't ask for permission, just waited to see if I'd run. I didn't. I touched her like a man who knew he might never get to again,
like every inch of her was bruised, and she was asking to be remembered, not claimed. Her lips found mine, not soft, not sweet, hungry, like she was starving for something deeper than flesh. But even then, even in that heat, I felt it, the part of her that wasn't there, the part that stayed distant, locked away in some dark room she wouldn't let me in. After, she lay in the crook of my arm, fingers tangled in my shirt, legs looped through mine like roots in deep soil. She didn't cry, but I did. Quiet, like a man who'd held himself together too long. Because in that moment I realized something. I didn't just want to keep her warm, I wanted to make her stay. But I knew better. She said 7 nights. And each one felt like the world giving me something it planned to take back. When the wind rose that night, she tensed. Her hand reached for the rifle beside the bed. Not startled, just ready. "It's not the wind I'm scared of," she murmured. And then she kissed me again, slower this time, like maybe she was saying goodbye in pieces. By the 4th night, the snow had let up, but the silence hadn't. Clara spent most of the day outside, barefoot in the frost, hanging sheets she didn't need to wash, fixing fence wire that hadn't been broken. I watched her from the window. She moved like a woman trying to stay busy enough not to remember what was waiting in her mind if she sat still.
When she came in, her fingers were red from the cold, and she crawled into bed without saying a word, just pressed her face into my chest and let the shivers pass through me like a storm I couldn't stop. I wrapped my arms around her, and for the first time, she said something soft into my shirt.
"I wish you weren't kind."
It nearly broke me, because the way she said it, like kindness was a curse, like the warmth I gave her, made whatever came before it harder to carry. I wanted to ask, God, I wanted to ask, what she was running from, who'd left those marks, why she wouldn't let me look too long at her back when she bathed. But I'd made a promise. And I've broken a lot of things in my life, but never a promise to a woman who looked like she hadn't had one kept in years. So instead, I held her, traced circles on her spine till her breathing slowed, and kissed the crown of her head like I was praying. She whispered in the dark,
"He used to breathe like you, before it turned to snoring, before the nights stopped being safe."
I didn't ask who he was, but I wanted to, and the way she gripped my shirt after she said it, like the words had slipped out too easy, told me I was the first man she'd spoken of him to since she left, if she left. Later that night, I heard boots in the snow, far off, maybe just a fox, maybe not. I started to get up, reach for the lantern, but she stopped me. "Let it pass," she said. "If it's looking for me, it won't knock." And just like that, I knew someone out there wasn't done with her. But maybe, just maybe, she was done with him. By the 5th night, I could feel it. Whatever was between us, it wasn't just need anymore. It was something heavier, something harder to name. She moved quieter that evening, wore her hair down for the first time. No braids, no ribbon, just loose and wild like the wind outside. She stood by the fire, skin golden in the glow, and watched me with this unreadable look, half longing, half goodbye. She walked over slow, pulled back the blanket, and slid in close enough that I could feel her heartbeat against mine. No words, just warmth. And when she touched me, this time it wasn't hesitant, it wasn't desperate, it was slow, intentional, like she was finally letting herself want something, like she wanted me to be the last man who ever touched her that way. We didn't speak for hours. only breath, only hands learning truths we couldn't ask for. And afterward, when I traced the curve of her back, she whispered, "You never asked why I cry." I froze, because Lord knows I'd thought it 100 times, but I'd kept my promise. She leaned up then, her lips brushing my ear. "That's why I stay." I didn't sleep at all that night. Not because of fear, not because of the storm, but because part of me started to wonder, what happens on the seventh night? Does she leave? Does someone come for her? Do I wake up alone in this bed I let her make warm? The sixth morning she didn't rise early. She lay beside me, longer than usual, face tucked into my chest, her breath soft and steady, like maybe she'd found peace, or was pretending well enough to fool herself. I brushed her hair back from her face, and for the first time she didn't flinch at the touch. "You're good at that," she said. I asked, careful not to break the quiet. "Good at what?" She didn't lift her head, just whispered, "Touching someone, like you're not afraid they'll disappear." Later I found her out back, sleeves rolled, washing her arms with a cloth like she was trying to erase something permanent. The sun hit just right and I saw them again. The scars. Not from work, not from accident. Thin, clean, purposeful. She caught me looking. For a second I thought she'd lash out, but instead she held out her arm like an offering. "Do you want to know where the first one came from?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say yes, but I said nothing. She smiled, sad. "It came from love. That's the worst kind." Then she dropped the cloth, turned, and walked back toward the cabin, like the moment never happened. But it had, and I felt it like a splinter under the skin. That night she didn't touch me right away. She stood at the window instead, staring out into the dark like she was waiting for a shadow to shape itself into a man. I stepped up behind her, placed my hands gently on her waist. She leaned back into me. "2 more nights," she said, her voice low, "and then either I leave or he finds me first." My hands tightened around her hips without meaning to, because it was the first time she said he might still be coming, and I knew, deep in my gut, if he did, I wasn't letting her go without a fight. The seventh night came with a stillness that felt like the world was holding its breath. She didn't leave the bed, she didn't cry, just pressed into me, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold wind howling outside. For the first time, I could hear the truth in her voice without her saying a word. She needed me more than she let on, more than I ever thought she would, but I needed her too. We'd been dancing around the edges of this, both of us pretending we were just passing through, pretending that when the time came we'd both walk away without looking back. But there was no more pretending now. I couldn't let her walk away, not when I felt the weight of her past pressing down on us. "Clara," I said, breaking the silence, "I don't know what you're running from, but I won't let it take you." She didn't move, didn't say a word. But she looked up at me then, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes. Not fear, not shame, but gratitude. And maybe that's when I knew. She'd given up too much of herself to protect someone else. She'd carried a load too heavy for too long, and I wasn't going to let her carry it any more. I kissed her then, soft, but with everything I had. "You don't have to run any more," I whispered. "Not with me." She kissed me back, but it was different than before. It wasn't just hunger. It was a promise. And in that moment, with the cold outside and the fire crackling between us, I made her the only promise I could keep, that I'd hold her, I'd fight for her, and when it all came to a head, I'd stand in front of whatever haunted her and not let it take her. That morning, I woke to find Clara already dressed, gun on the table, boots laced tight, eyes sharp and distant. She hadn't slept. I could tell by the way she held her coffee, hands steady but her jaw set like stone. "You expectin' someone?" I asked, careful. She didn't answer, just slid the rifle toward me across the table. "I need you to aim straight if the knock comes." The fire inside me stirred then, hotter than fear, not because I doubted myself, but because I finally understood. She wasn't planning to run anymore. She was planning to stand. We walked the property line after breakfast, snow up to our calves, wind howling like it knew something we didn't. And that's when I saw them. Tracks. Not mine, not hers. Hoof prints, 4 of them, deep, fresh, headed straight for the cabin. She saw them too, didn't flinch, didn't cry, just nodded once like she'd been expecting this all along. "He's close," she said, "close enough to see the smoke from our chimney." And then she reached for my hand, for the first time without hesitation, without condition. "If I don't make it through tomorrow, bury me somewhere quiet. Not marked, just—" I cut her off. "Don't talk like that." But she squeezed my hand harder. "Just promise me, if he gets inside, you aim for his eyes." I didn't ask who he was, didn't need to anymore. The man comin' wasn't just an old flame. He was a fire she'd barely crawled out of alive, and now he wanted to finish the burn. We boarded the windows before sundown, stacked wood high behind the door, loaded every round I had, laid them out like playing cards on the table. She didn't speak much, just moved with purpose, every nail she hammered like a prayer. By dusk, the air had gone still, the kind of stillness you feel in your bones before a storm breaks. She sat across from me at the table, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, eyes not meeting mine. I reached for her hand, cold, trembling, but not from fear. "You don't have to fight alone." She looked up, finally. "I always have." Then she stood, stepped around the table, and sank into my lap, straddled me like a woman desperate to feel something other than dread. We didn't speak, didn't need to. Her kiss said all the things she couldn't say out loud. "Thank you, I'm sorry, and maybe goodbye." And just when her breathing slowed, when our bodies were tangled in that fragile kind of calm lovers pretend is permanent, the knock came. 3 slow thuds. Not hurried, not uncertain, just heavy, like a man who thought he already owned whatever stood on the other side. She froze. I felt it in her spine, in the way her hands dug into my shoulders. The silence was so thick I thought I could hear her heartbeat through the floorboards. Another knock. I rose, set her gently aside, and reached for the rifle. She stood behind me, barefoot, lips parted like she wanted to scream, but didn't. "Don't open it," she whispered. "Then he wins," I said. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. Then a voice, low, familiar, calm. "You can keep her for one more night, stranger, but come morning, she's mine again." We didn't sleep that night. The fire burned low. The rifle stayed loaded in my lap. And Clara, she sat on the edge of the bed, back straight, staring into the flames like she could see him in the smoke. She didn't ask if I was scared. I think she knew the answer. By dawn, the snow had stopped, but something colder had taken its place. She dressed in silence, dark skirt, dark blouse, no corset, no softness, hair pulled back in a knot so tight it looked like a noose. And when she buckled the pistol to her thigh, I realized something. She hadn't come here to hide. She'd come here to finish. "What does he want, Clara?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign in my throat, gravel and dread. She looked at me like I'd already guessed. He wants to remind me I was never free. I stood, walked to her slow, placed my hands on her waist. You are now. But she didn't smile, didn't nod, just leaned in and kissed me like a woman about to walk into hell and didn't want to do it with a stranger's taste on her lips. The sun rose slow and blood orange behind the hills, and with it, the sound of hoofbeats. One horse, deliberate, drawing closer. She stepped outside before I could stop her, and I followed. He rode up like he owned the ground beneath him, hat low, black coat, smile like a knife you don't see till it's in your back. "Clara," he said, voice smooth and rotten, "come home." But she didn't move. Just stood there, wind tugging at her dress, jaw locked like a gate. "This is home now," she said. He laughed, not loud, not cruel, just confident. "No, darling. You're just squatting in someone else's quiet, and it's time you remembered who you belong to." That's when I stepped beside her, rifle in hand, feet planted deep. "She don't belong to you." He looked at me like I was a fly on his dinner. "Then you'll die for her or with her. And Clara?" She said nothing, but she cocked her pistol and aimed it straight at the heart that once claimed hers. For a breathless second, no one moved. The wind caught her hair. The man on the horse smirked like he'd already won, and I could feel Clara's pulse, tight, furious beneath the sleeve of my coat. He leaned forward in the saddle, resting one hand on his pistol like he was petting a dog. "You gonna shoot me, Clara?" he said, like it was a joke he'd told before. "You already died," she answered, voice like splinters, "the night you threw my sister in the river." Silence dropped heavy, and that's when I saw it. The flicker in his face. The first crack. Clara's hands didn't shake, not anymore. "You always thought I was the weak one," she said. "But I was the one who crawled out. I was the one who buried her. I was the one who kept breathing." He chuckled, dry, bitter. "You think he's going to protect you?" He nodded at me, dismissive. "You think that'll bring her back?" She didn't answer with words, she answered with lead. The first shot rang out like a scream through the valley, and it was hers, struck him high in the shoulder, spun him off the saddle. Before he could hit the ground, I was already moving, rifle raised, heart pounding like thunder on dry land. He rolled, fast, came up with his gun drawn, fired. I felt the heat of the round split past my arm. Clara shouted, "Down!" I dropped, heard her second shot crack the air, clean and sure. Then silence. He slumped to the snow, eyes wide, gun still clutched in his hand like he hadn't believed she'd do it. Not her. Not the girl he used to call Little Bird. She walked toward him, slow, steady, tears frozen on her cheeks. And when she stood over him, she didn't gloat, didn't spit, didn't curse his name. She just whispered, "That's for everything you thought I'd never survive." Then she dropped her pistol, right there in the snow, and fell to her knees. We buried him out by the edge of the ridge. No marker, no prayer, just dirt, cold and hard. Clara didn't say much after that. She just stood beside me in the morning frost, her eyes fixed on the horizon like she wasn't sure whether to run toward it or away from it. When we got back inside, the cabin felt hollow, like the part of the house that had kept her safe had gone with the bullet. I made her tea. She didn't drink it. I built a fire. She didn't sit near it. I sat across from her waiting. And then, just before sundown, she finally spoke. "You gave me back something I didn't think I deserved." I nodded, didn't press. She continued, voice barely above a breath.
He was my husband, but he was never my home.
She looked at me then, really looked.
You were.
My throat tightened, not from sorrow, from hope. But I didn't want to trap her, didn't want to ask her to stay just because I was afraid to sleep alone again. So I stood, gave her space, walked toward the door. But her hand found mine before I reached it.
I still cry in my sleep, she whispered.
Then I'll still hold you, I said. That night she crawled into my bed the way a woman climbs out of a grave, not to vanish, but to live. No promises, no bargains, just her, just me, just warmth. The wind howled again, but it sounded different this time, like it was moving on to somewhere else, some other ghost. And for the first time in a long time, there was no knock at the door, no crying in the dark, just her breath against my neck, and the knowledge that the week she promised me wasn't the end. It was the beginning.